Stay tuned after the episode to hear our latest edition of And Then What. This holiday, give the gift of the diaries to someone who doesn't know they need it, or your loved one who can't get enough. Last year, Diaries Plus members saved this show. We lost multiple major sponsors, and the community stepped up and said, these stories matter, not just to me, but for all of us. And they kept us going. A year later, we are through the worst of it, but we aren't out of the woods. So please consider joining Diaries Plus and helping power this show for the next generation. Right now, as a bonus gift for supporting the Diaries this holiday, you can get our theme song as your ringtone. You can find a link in the show notes. We're grateful for you. Thank you for listening. Thanks for powering this show.
All right, Fitz, you have two boys.
I do.
One of them is approaching high school. Have you had the experience yet of chaperoning any fun school field trips that your boys have taken?
Oh, I've thought about threatening to chaperone a school dance, but haven't done that. You know, it's funny. Becca chaperoned a few field trips. I have not. But, you know, a funny thing about this is that COVID was one of those things that actually really impacted field trips. So we kind of missed out on a few years of that. Took them a while to kind of come back to that. Because I don't know, as a kid, I remember just kind of having them once every couple of months, and there was just this awesome day that you were like, yes. And my eldest son got to go to a pretty cool outdoor education one, which was bigger. But the random trips to the museum, man, I don't know, not so much.
Yeah, that definitely makes me a little sad. I mean, I feel like when I think back to my high school days, my most prominent memories are just the field trips that we took. I mean, in middle school, we did a 3-night trip to Catalina Island. I remember in 7th grade, we would camp in Yosemite for a few nights. A lot of field trips to Chabot Space and Science Center in Oakland. If you're from the Bay Area, you know what I mean. You know, in my opinion, field trips are just a sure way to get kids connected to the outdoors. And I think for some, could even spark that, flame for adventure later on.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's this super impactful, even if it doesn't make a change, kids remember that stuff.
Totally. And the reason why I bring this up is because I have a dear friend, Taylor Mihelic. She's a high school biology teacher in Central California. And she takes her students on all sorts of field trips, whether it's plant identification hikes through the forest or habitat restoration projects on the coast. Taylor has told me that she gets the best out of her students when there's this sense of adventure in the air, when they're outside of the class. And during her summer break this year, Taylor took her own field trip on the Tour Divide bike race, teaching herself a lesson in optimism and exploring the edge of her limits. Today, we're going to find out if it's easier to ride your bike across the country or teach a classroom full of Gen Alpha high school students. I, for one, would be terrified of doing either.
6'7".
Dude, I don't know what that is, but the kids that I coach keep saying that, and I don't know if I should be scared or confused.
I'm not even going to tell you. Dude, it's just such a rabbit hole. I'm Fitz Cahall.
I'm Marco Seiler Gonzalez.
You're listening to the Dirtbag Diaries.
How's it going? Good. My day's actually going pretty good. Hello. Did you guys forget something?
It's late afternoon at Pioneer Valley High School. Taylor Mihelic, or Miss Mihelic, is greeting her students as they mosey into her 7th period biology class. The kids are upbeat, chatty. That's the way Taylor prefers it. Once the bell rings, Taylor gets to the first item on the agenda: get outside and retrieve your plants.
We're going to finish our transpiration lab.
The kids respond well to Taylor for a bunch of reasons, but one is that she's relatable. She's 30 years old, rocks a snapback, nose ring, and a crew neck. It doesn't necessarily scream stuffy biology teacher. And I don't know if you have much experience with teenagers. I mean, odds are you were one at one point in your life, but first impressions matter a lot. Here's Cyrus Cruz and Natalia Ojeda. They were in Taylor's biology class last year as sophomores.
My very first impression of Miss Mihelic was that she looked a lot like this like famous singer or like I don't know if you're familiar with Clairo, but she kind of like gave me like the resemblance of her and like her vibe. And I liked her. She was very welcoming at first. She was cracking jokes the first day of school.
I was kind of surprised because like I thought it was just gonna be like some like old dude or like some like old lady, and I saw like I thought she was like 30 at max, and I was like, oh, she looks pretty cool. I just noticed she was like really lively. She had a bunch of personality. She wasn't like, oh, hey guys. I was like, oh, welcome to class, yada yada, and she just brought up like the general mood. Like I first saw the class, like I kind of thought I was like, okay, this class is gonna be pretty fun because I like this teacher.
Cyrus's fondest memories of Taylor's class are the small field trips they took outside of the classroom throughout the year. Pioneer Valley High School has around 4,000 students, so there's only so many resources for field trips outside of campus. Taylor realized that you didn't need to go that far from the classroom to get the kids invested in the outdoors.
We had picked a tree at the beginning of the year, and then we kind of studied how it would grow throughout the year. And I think just going outside in general was like huge. The fact that it was like changing year round, I think that was the most like interesting part. Like if they were lined up together and be like, well, it should look like this earlier, and then like now it's different. I was like, oh, this thing's alive.
It's a pretty simple yet impactful teaching method. After all, biology doesn't come from a textbook or a lecture. It's going on around us all the time, living, breathing, and changing.
We have like actually quite a nice large campus with tons of trees, tons of native plants and non-native plants. There's like some zones that in the winter time, a bunch of mushrooms will grow. And so it's cool to just also be like, okay, we're on our campus at school, which maybe is like, you know, school's boring or school's the same thing that you see every day, but maybe just kind of like trying to think about how you can pay attention to the things around you and that like nature is even just like at your school or on your walk home or in your neighborhood, especially because a lot of kids don't really go anywhere besides from home to school, maybe to their job or somewhere just like in their neighborhood. So I feel like I'm super passionate just about like what is around you and getting to like pay attention to that. And plus kids just love being outside.
Teaching is second nature for Taylor, but she'd be the first one to tell you that teaching high school biology was not on her life bingo card.
I never wanted to be a teacher ever. Like that was never a thing that I thought I would ever do. I studied nutrition in college and like thought I'd want to be a dietitian, like realized I didn't really want to work in hospitals, but I like love science and like really liked working with people and I love food and cooking and stuff. So I was like, oh, this is the perfect thing. And then realizing that like what the job was not actually like what I thought it was going to be. So I mostly like worked in a kitchen, cooking lunch at a cafe. I worked at the climbing gym. And I honestly was kind of tired of being like extremely poor.
At the time, Taylor had a friend who was teaching middle school, so Taylor got her substitute credentials and started to sub at her friend's classes.
So it was like super chaotic and kids were like jumping over the desk and they're like, she says we can do this, whatever. And they have like all these like snacks and all this stuff. And I was like, whoa, this is actually like, kind of fun. And so that was really inspiring for me.
Taylor ended up going back to her alma mater at Cal Poly in 2019 to get her teaching credentials. During her student teaching program, Taylor was placed at Pioneer Valley in Santa Maria, about a 30-minute drive from where she lives in San Luis Obispo, which is colloquially known as SLO.
And so I was like kind of bummed because I was also like I had never driven to a job before. Like I've only ridden my bike to work. And so I was like, ugh, right when my student teaching is done, like I'm out of there. I'm not doing this.
Santa Maria is also worlds apart demographically than SLO. A lot of the students at Pioneer Valley are first or second generation in the U.S. They've immigrated from places like Vietnam, Senegal, Mexico, El Salvador, the Philippines.
Where I live is like predominantly white and like middle upper class. And Santa Maria, where I teach, is completely the opposite of that. I have like pretty much no white students. My school is like a Title I school who gets funding basically just based on like income of the community. So we get like federal funding to help pay for extra programs and teachers and things like that.
That extra funding is crucial to assist kids who are newly immigrated to the country. In some cases, these students haven't been in the US longer than a year and don't speak any English. Taylor's classes are often the first time some of them are engaging with the outdoors.
I feel like the majority of kids don't have any experience in the outdoors at all. And like, there's some kids where I'll be like, okay, you're like walking through a forest or something. And then I'm like, how many kids have been in a forest before? And like everyone just kind of like looks at each other and is like, no one's like been in a forest. And so we like took them on a field trip to the like local state beach that's like dunes and oak woodlands. And it was so fun. I think it was almost more fun for me to see them seeing these things that like I love and care about so much, like for the first time. And so we like, yeah, walked through these like oak woodlands and went on the dunes and went to the beach. We were doing like lots of bird watching and kids were freaking out, like, oh my God, miss, the bird, like freaking out and so stoked. And like watching kids like walk on sand for the first time, like so awkward and funny, or like, going up to the edge of the ocean as like, the tide recedes and then of course the wave comes and gets your feet all wet. That like every person has experienced that. And they're like, ah, and it was just like, yeah, the most like wonderful, cool thing to see. So yeah, there's some kids who, go hiking with their family. And then there's some kids who've like literally never done that before. And it's just good for people to be outside and like interacting with wild places. And especially on the Central Coast, like there's a lot of wild places that are like pretty uncrowded and like fairly untouched.
Taylor realized that her class could be a pressure release valve of sorts for her students.
A lot of those kids too are just like dealing with like extremely like adult issues, like at home or with their peers, or there's definitely like gang stuff at my school, definitely like fights at my school. And so getting to like just be a positive adult that I'm like, I see you, I respect you, and like totally receiving that back from them, I think is just like a powerful like human connection, where I'm like, maybe you're not gonna like study biology in college, but like we can still like have a good relationship and be kind to each other and like teach each other something.
The hang up around having to drive to work quickly fell by the wayside. Taylor also found that the inconvenient parts of teaching in Santa Maria were actually a huge positive.
Honestly, one of the main things too is like not seeing my students all around town. Like here, I see kids like on the mountain bike trails, or like a kid's riding his e-bike on the trail, and I'm like yell at him and cuss at him. I'm like, Jack, get out of here, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, what if that was my student? Like, I can't be doing that if that was my student, But also I have my like regular life self too, where like maybe, there's like a big bike party and I'm like drinking a beer in a parking lot or something. And I like don't want my students to see me doing that.
I think we can all agree that seeing your teacher outside of school, let alone drinking a beer in the parking lot, is a strange experience. All of which made SLO the perfect place for Taylor to explore a fast-growing passion for bikepacking and road racing.
San Luis Obispo here is such like a beautiful, cool place where there's like tons of trails, tons of roads, dirt roads, and like not that many people. So like oftentimes I like go on a ride and see nobody. But yeah, I feel like especially growing up in Santa Cruz, seeing a lot of bike tour people coming through town with like all their stuff on their bike. And I was just like, what is that? That's so weird and cool. I want to do that, but like never thought that that was like a thing for me ever. And so then, yeah, especially like going to Cal Poly and being here and having just like kind of endless trails to explore. Like even still, I like ride new trails here, and getting to just like go wherever I want is really cool.
Taylor's path to long-distance bikepacking isn't too far off from her becoming a teacher. They both started with a tip from a friend. Back in 2018, two of her friends had just completed the Tour Divide, an unofficial bike route that stretches from the US-Canada border all the way down to the southern border in New Mexico.
And I was just like, what the heck? How could somebody do this? And like maybe at that time I would like go on a ride that was like 15 miles like on the road, or like a 5 mile mountain bike ride. And then the following year, my really good friend Rory was like, yo, this is on my bucket list.
Taylor decided to take on the challenge, touring the divide going northbound from Mexico to Canada with Rory and 2 other friends.
So like the difference, of touring versus racing. Touring is like you're taking your time, you're going for like an afternoon swim, you're stopping to pick huckleberries. It's like very lovely existence. So we were like in Colorado when the Tour Divide race started that year. And so all the racers mostly started in Banff and rode southbound, so past us. And so we are passing like tons and tons of people. And I just remember being so like impressed and enamored and being like, the heck, these people are crazy. Like no one has like a tent or a stove. They're going so fast. And I was like, I'll never do that. I can never do that. That's so crazy.
Taylor and her crew biked the roughly 2,700-mile line over 50 days. That's far from what anyone would consider race pace, but it was the longest that Taylor had ever been on her bike before.
That was the thing that really like made me super stoked on bike packing and just like kind of really changed my like maybe limits that I saw on myself of being able to do whatever I want, which was like the coolest experience. Maybe was kind of on the wrong bike and kind of had too much stuff, but like we did it and that like felt really cool. But then kind of like in the time after that, I started riding like a lot more and kind of just like got obsessed with riding my bike and would kind of do like smaller bike pack races that were like 300 miles or 400 miles or just going on like fun longer tours with friends that would like every trip I would go on would just be like all about where can I like go bike packing? Like I'm gonna like go to Arizona, I'm gonna go to Idaho, I'm gonna go to Washington.
In 2020, Taylor and her friend took on the Oregon Timber Trail, a nearly 700-mile line that climbs 70,000 feet through the Oregon backcountry.
That's kind of a route that people ride in sections, and people are like, oh, what section are you riding? And we're like, we're doing the whole thing. And they're like, what day did you start? And we'd like say what day we started, and they're like, oh, what? You guys are actually going kind of fast. And we're like, yeah, we are going kind of fast. So it was like kind of put like a little fire under our ass, but also I'm just like, we're actually super capable and strong. And so like finishing that was like a huge thing for me.
After the break, Taylor takes on her biggest challenge yet. Stay with us.
We have a Doug fir tree out in our front yard. The kids used to be taller than it. It was like a little Charlie Brown Christmas tree that was so perfect. But as they've grown, the tree has outpaced them. It's a nice reminder of the scale that Mother Nature works at. And it made me appreciate all the trees around me. They sure make the world a better place. That's why Oboz Footwear has been committed to planting trees. As a certified B Corp, Oboz cares about their impact on the planet and invests in a number of initiatives that aim to restore the natural environment. They just hit a major milestone. Since 2007, they've helped plant over 7 million trees. 7 million. That's a lot. You might even be able to see some of those trees in Oregon, where Douglas fir trees are planted to restore areas affected by wildfire. Thanks, Oboz, for supporting the show, but more importantly, thanks for planting trees. We appreciate it. To learn more about Oboz, check out obozfootwear.com/lovehiking. This is the time of year where my life becomes total mayhem because snow starts falling, and guess what? It does not do it on a schedule. I have a tough time staying on top of both food and nutrition as my days get a little more hectic. Ka'Chava is my secret weapon for this time of year. It makes it easy to get the protein I need to stay fueled and energized throughout the season. Ka'Chava's whole body meal shakes keep your body and mind nourished all day. With 2 scoops of Ka'Chava, you get 85 plus superfoods, nutrients, and plant-based ingredients. And with vitamin C, zinc, and probiotics, I'm giving my immune system a little extra nourishment. Ka'Chava has a new flavor, chocolate mint. It's a perfect mix of rich chocolate and cool mint that does not have a sugar hangover. Keep your holiday game strong. Get those powder days. Go to Ka'Chava.com and use code DIARIES for 15% off your next order. That's Ka'Chava, Kachava.com, code DIARIES for 15% off.
Within just a few years of getting into the sport, Taylor was starting to crush local bike races and heavy lines around the country, and her feats were not going unnoticed.
She is totally a legend in the community of super epic San Luis Obispo cyclists, of which is like, there are a lot of them. And then Taylor is like, in my opinion, at the top of that. My name's Dan Connell. I go by Dirty Dan in the cycling world. I have dedicated my life to bicycle adventure for the last few years. I work as a guide out at the Channel Islands, so I work on a boat. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm fully focusing on cycling adventures.
I gotta ask, what's the Dirty Dan? Where does his name come from?
Oh man, I don't know. Can we go X-rated on this podcast?
Let's go X-rated, man. I mean, it's like all.
When I started working on the boats, the captain of the boat he was Captain Dan.
Mhm.
And we had to differentiate the two, the two names. And like my position on the boat was just doing a lot of the dirty work, particularly one incident where plumbing issues on a boat are a real thing, and so there was one incident where there was a severe backup, and I went down beneath and unfortunately had to how can I say, I had to tackle it really hands-on from beneath, and essentially just got like full waterfall with like everything that had been piling up in there for a day or so with all of our guests. And that I think really cemented the name, the term Dirty Dan.
God, dude.
And then that just stuck. And then anytime we met people or we introduced guests to the boat, it's like, hey, there's Captain Dan and there's Dirty Dan. That was that. And then it also kind of works out because a lot of the bike stuff I do is like ends up being pretty dirty work too, just when you do things like what we'll get into, the Tour Divide and other things like that, you try and keep hygiene going, but sometimes you just got to really let the filth take over. And so I have absolutely no problem with that,
Dan and Taylor started to cross paths at local bike races around SLO. They became fast friends through their shared passion of adventure riding. Dan, who had completed the Tour Divide 4 out of 5 attempts, had a hunch that it was only a matter of time before Taylor would set her sights on racing it.
The Tour Divide is the best bike race in the world. That's a fact. It's an extremely long race. It's 2,750 miles, give or take, that goes from Banff in Canada and ends at the border with Mexico and New Mexico at a crossing called Antelope Wells. What really sets the Tour Divide apart is that it is completely self-supported, meaning once you take off from Banff, you're really on your own until you get to Antelope Wells. You can use commercial establishments that are available to everybody. So the classic thing is, everyone stops at the gas stations to load up on junk food to keep on trucking, but you're not arranging anything ahead of time. You're not you certainly don't have like a support vehicle of any kind coming to help you out. You're really just on your own, which is what creates the true adventure of the Tour Divide, and I think what draws myself and what draws a lot of people to it is that the biking is one small part of the Tour Divide, and the rest of it is logistics, maybe strategy, just listening to your mind and body and figuring out your limits and how far you want to push all that. And there's just there's so many aspects to it that make it feel like more of an expedition than simply a bike race.
The Tour Divide is also a bit underground, or a dark horse in the bike racing world. It doesn't have any official sponsorship, structure, or authority.
Tour Divide follows a very specific route that was created by the Adventure Cycling Association. That route was put out there not with the intention of it being a race. It was put out there just to be a route for people to go enjoy. And then a group of folks were like, hey, why don't we do a race? Why don't we see how fast we can, get from the top to the bottom in a really grassroots setting? So this group of people went and raced it, and the word kind of got out, and those people who raced it had a great time, and year after year kept coming back. And now, it's gone from being that kind of random, low-key group of people racing it to now it's like, I think this year there were 250 people at the start. And in the general bikepacking community, which is growing every year, it's certainly regarded as the bikepacking race, if not one of the main bikepacking races in the entire world. In the United States, certainly it's the longest and regarded as the most challenging. The length of the Tour Divide, I think, is what really sets it apart, because you're not sprinting that. It's a long game.
The only way to really keep tabs on the race is through an online tracker, which geotags every racer on the divide. In 2024, Taylor had her eyes on the tracker, watching friends like Dan race the tour.
Looking at the tracker and was like really stoked, and also I knew the route, and so it's fun to like see where people are. And then I was like, oh no, I like had this bad thought where I was like, what if I did it next year? I was like, ah, dang it. Like once it entered my brain, my brain is broken. And I'm just like, oh, well, all right, now I have to do this thing. I don't even know if I want to do it, but I just like feel like I have to now, which was kind of funny. But it was nice because it was like a year ahead of time. So it was like during the race in 2024 that I was like, okay, next year I'm doing this, and I'm like going all in and totally committing to this. And so, yeah, it was really fun too, of like having my like teaching job and being all in with that. And then coming home and being really committed to training and riding.
And leading up to it, we didn't talk much about training. I mean, she had training super dialed. I was watching her training, just from talking to her and also following her Strava. And she would just casually go put out these like 100-mile, 200-mile days, on the weekends. And it was like, okay, cool. Like you have to have some serious motivation to go do that. That's not just going to happen by chance. So I was kind of picking up on the fact. I was like, okay, sweet. Taylor is like really going for this. And it was cool to see that.
I will say teaching is like a very good complement to going on longer trips, which I don't think that can be the whole reason why someone wants to teach, because I think people sometimes do that and then get super burnt out because they're like, this is not worth it. But if you like to do things and you like teaching, it's a pretty good pair.
Taylor used any time outside the classroom to put miles down on the bike. Those adventures always led to good stories for her students, explaining where she bivvied on an overnight bikepacking trip, or how many miles she climbed and all the natural, wild things she saw. Did she tell you anything about the Tour Divide or what she was going to do that summer?
She did mention that she would have to go and like practice, and just how like she would have to train, or just like when she wasn't here on like the last day of school because it was like the first day of her trip.
This is Anaí Orozco. She was in Taylor's biology class last year.
I thought it was really impressive because that's just not something that you see very often. Just going from Canada to Mexico is insane, much less on a bike. Like on a plane is already boring enough for me, so that's pretty impressive.
Anaí is right. It's really impressive. And this probably goes without saying, but teaching kids, let alone high school students, is a really hard job. According to a study out of the University of Pennsylvania, 44% of teachers quit within their first 5 years. Now, the reasons behind that massive attrition rate varies, of course, but the bottom line, you need some sense of optimism to be a teacher in this country. Yeah, no, I guess maybe I'm trying to answer this question like, is it harder to teach kids or is it harder to do the Tour Divide?
Wow, I love that. Is it harder to teach kids or to do the Tour Divide? I would imagine it's harder to teach kids.
Do you think that there are any like traits that Taylor has as a teacher that translates over to the tour?
Yeah, I think optimism to do the Tour Divide, it does require a base level of optimism because things just will not go your way. It's impossible for things to go your way as expected from the beginning. And so it does require an attitude that's kind of like, cool, like things are shit, but I'm just going to keep moving forward because that's what I told myself I would do, and that can surface in a million different ways. And if you want to make it to the finish line, which should be your number one priority, you have to maintain a certain level of optimism to push you through all of that shit that can come up. And I think people have different ways of maintaining that optimism. Like a lot of times, a really cool thing about the Tour Divide is like you're going through the Rocky Mountains, so it's freaking gorgeous. So it's like sometimes you just need to stop and look up and be like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm here right now. Like, who cares that I'm stuck in a single speed for until I get to the next bike shop? Like, I'm pedaling through the Great Plains of Wyoming. It's like, what? So
yeah,
I think that level of optimism is required. And with someone like Taylor, who's just like, her nature is just, she's such a positive being. and constantly spreading that to those around her, with her students, just with her and the entire community. She's constantly just like pushing out this energy that's really positive.
As it came time for Taylor to finally ship out to Canada with her bike, the realities of the tour were starting to set in. As Dan said, it's self-supported, and riders often find themselves covering hundreds of miles alone, which is understandably nerve-wracking, especially considering that Taylor had brushed close to danger on her first time riding the Tour Divide with her friends 6 years ago.
As the divide was getting closer to, I was like super freaking stressed and like really scared. The main thing that I was like the most afraid of was like bad weather. When we toured the route, I like almost got struck by lightning, like 100 feet away, struck in the middle of the road, like in between me and my friends, like dirt and rocks flying everywhere in pouring rain. And like that was extremely traumatizing. Where I think most things I like deal with like scary situations where I'm like, probably I'm fine. Because, like, probably you are fine. Like, probably you're not going to get struck by lightning. Probably, like, you're not going to get eaten by a bear or something. But, like, it's kind of funny with the divide. Like, a lot of the stuff is, like, pretty serious of just, like, really intense weather, especially lightning. There's, like, a lot of kind of areas of, like, big open grasslands with, like, you're the tallest thing there. There's no trees. It's just, like, sagebrush and, like, you on your bike. So definitely lightning was like the main thing I was like really afraid of.
On June 13th, Taylor, along with roughly 200 other riders, set out southbound from Banff. Taylor's first priority was to finish the race, but her second priority was doing it within 22 days. That's roughly 120 miles every day to stay on pace.
In the beginning of the race, I was just like full fear, everything of just like not feeling confident in myself, not feeling like I maybe like could make the decisions that were right, or felt like, oh, if am I stopping too early, or do I not have like the right beta, or am I going to get lost, or all these like weird just like fear things. And waking up and just, like looking at the weather and being like, oh no, like a storm's coming, everything's gonna be like so bad and scary. Yeah, operating from like a place of fear, really just then a few days in being like, wait, like I'm totally dialed. Like I'm fine. My body feels great. My navigation's good. All my systems are working great. My bike feels great. And then really just like kind of trying to turn that like fear around. And then truly like after that, I was just like, I'm not scared. I feel great and I feel really proud of myself and like I'm doing it.
Within her first week on the trail, Taylor's fears of bad weather and bear attacks faded away. She pedaled over 1,200 miles, cutting straight through Montana, across the northeastern corner of Idaho into Wyoming, eventually hitting a remote stretch of the Great Divide Basin.
There's like this section called the Great Basin that's like 100+ miles of like no water, no food, no people, which everyone's kind of like, oh, the Great Basin, like you're getting to this place is like kind of scary. Some people really like it, some people really hate it. And I just had the most like magical, beautiful time going through the basin. I felt really prepared. I like rode into the night and had like a huge tailwind. I was like feeling so good. I just like pulled over at like midnight or 1 a.m. or something. I was like so tired. I was like, okay, I need to sleep for a little bit and like get up as early as I can and like keep riding. And there's like wild horses. It's like this magical, beautiful place. And then you're like, okay, I'm through the basin, and you get to this like town called Wamsutter that's just like the grossest place ever. That's just like oil rigs, like oil trucks, just like treatment on the road that's like sodium chloride, I think treatment to like keep the dust down. And it's like all over your bike and all over your body and like burning your skin. And then realized like all my stuff was about to die. Like my Garmin, which is like my directions, my battery pack to like charge my phone, everything. And I was just like, oh my God, what am I doing? And then I was like, stand up pedaling. I think I was kind of dehydrated too. Stand up pedaling and just like felt my Achilles tendon just like go like full pop. So painful. I never really had an injury like that before. And so I was just like, oh no, what do I do? Am I going to be able to continue? I didn't know.
Taylor managed to fight through the injury into the next morning, pushing another 80 miles to Bush Mountain Lodge in northern Colorado, just past the Wyoming state line.
I'm just going to stay here for 24 hours, which like previously in the race, I was just like, pedal down, trying to go as fast as I can, and like really committed to that. I mean, like not killing myself over it, but just like with some haste for sure. So stopping for 24 hours was like really hard. But then after resting for like a full day, I was still like definitely in a ton of pain, but I could actually pedal and walk, where before that I like couldn't really pedal or walk very well.
Taylor kept pushing, buoyed by messages from her friends and family who were keeping tabs on her progress via the race tracker.
And then, of course, some very savvy kids, of course, find the tracker. Like, I got a really unhinged email from Mariah and Janine. They're like, hey, we found you on the internet. What's up? How are you doing? Have you gotten eaten by a bear? I hope you're winning. How's it going? We're following you on the tracker, like, blah. And, like, a picture of their, like, weird mac and cheese that they made and, like, some funny selfies.
So during summer, me and my friend Janine, we emailed her during the time she was away, and we were just checking up on her, seeing how she was doing.
Said savvy kid Mariah Saital.
Wait, can I bring it up? Okay. I said, hello, Miss Mihelic, we miss you. Have you arrived to Mexico yet? We looked you up on Google and found your portfolio with some pics. Anyways, we hope you have a safe and great summer. Stay strong. We support you from afar. Lock in. Look at this masterpiece. Also, this was like a photo me and Janine took to show her. So, yeah, that was us checking up on her.
And so, like, that just really was like melted me, where I was like, oh, these kids like really love me, because like I really love them too. But that was just like really sweet, being in the middle of this like really weird hard thing and being like, oh, these kids are thinking about me. It's cute.
Taylor got within striking distance of the finish line on her 22nd day, but she decided to hold off for a night so her mom could meet her at the end in Antelope Wells, New Mexico. On her 23rd day of the tour, after 2,712 miles and 158,000 total feet of climbing, Taylor cruised down single track until reaching the final 30-mile stretch of flat pavement.
Was having such a fun time, just like getting to actually mountain bike too on like really fun flowy trails, and just being like fucking elated, like so happy and so proud of myself, and like listening to music. And then my mom like drove past me, which was really cute, on her way to pick me up. Definitely like tears and feeling so happy and really proud of myself, and just yeah, it was like the best feeling ever.
Taylor's experience on the Tour Divide has given her new lore and adventures to share with her students. Again, here's Mariah and Cyrus. Did Miss Mihelic's adventure over the summer inspire you at all to spend more time outdoors or pursue anything?
She did inspire me in like quite a bit of ways. Like whenever I was outside of the house, I'd always think how many times Miss Mihelic passed by a tree or something. She's probably seen a lot. But also like how it'd be cool to like do what she's doing, like riding bikes around everywhere and being adventurous. And that kind of made me want to do that as well. And also for like a long time during the summer, I was like pondering about doing what she does, like being a biology teacher or doing the stuff that she does. That was really inspiring. And I always thought about that.
It's wild just to think that she's able to do this, like to be consistent with her job as well as like I know she trains, like without it, like she can't do it, but it's like astonishing to me. And like I think it's actually really inspiring. It's just the fact that she's able to do a lot, and like the fact that she can keep up with everything, and like it's like, oh, if she can do it, I can. If my biology teacher can do it, then so can I.
Is it harder to race the Tour Divide or teach kids? If you possess the same spirit and optimism that Taylor has, I don't think it really matters. What's more important is finding those small windows in life to get outside and explore in the first place. Giving yourself permission to go on those field trips that made us so stoked as kids.
I feel like for me, of doing any big hard thing, and I think like a lot of kind of like endurance athletes would agree with this, of like breaking things like into chunks that feel really like manageable. Even, some days I'm just like, okay, super engaged and locked in with like fourth period right now. And then I have lunch and I have a little break. And then I'm like fifth period and I'm like super engaged and locked in with this. If you're like, oh my God, I have this whole year of 9 months of this same day repeating, or like I'm having conflict with this person, I have to be with them for 9 months. Like this is a long time. I think that feels impossible to like feel optimistic and excited, or even like being able to do your best and not get burnt out. And it's the same thing for like even like a day ride. If you're going to go ride 20 miles or something, you're like maybe 10 miles there and 10 miles back, of being like, okay, I just have to get to my turnaround spot. And once I'm there, then I'm like, all I have to do is like get home from there. Or like a multi-day thing, you're like one day in, and then, maybe the next day you have to go over a big pass. You make it over the big pass of just like things in chunks that kind of allow you to still feel excited. Also, I think that it's impossible to do either of these things if you don't like truly actually like love it. Even if having like a bad day with students or whatever, kids who just don't care and engaged or something. But I'm just like, I love these kids and they're super funny and super weird. And so I'm like, you win some, you lose some. Like tomorrow we'll probably have like a funny, cool day, or like we'll do something funny and fun outside, or getting to switch it up, because I'm like, I really love this and I love these kids. And so that's like encouraging in itself. And like same as like doing like a long thing like the Tour Divide bikepacking, you're like, oh, I just like got rained on and then slept in like an outhouse and then just like ate a bag of Cheetos for breakfast. I mean, I think the main thing is just like being curious and like excited to see something new and feeling like open-minded and like kind of hopeful that you're gonna see something cool.
Thanks, Taylor, for sharing your story. Thanks to Dan, and a special shout out to the students, Cyrus, Natalia, and Mariah, for talking with us. Our stories come from friends of friends, and from you, our community. If you have a compelling idea for a guest or story lead, please give us a shout. You can email us at editor@ducktapethandbeer.com. Thanks to the folks who have recently become Diaries Plus members. You make this show accessible to the rest of the community. We would not be here without you. We are so grateful. Thank you. Want another way to help? Write us a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps others find the show. It keeps us up in the ratings. It makes a big difference. Music today from Joya, Strings in the Kitchen, Drexler, Oak and Pine, Whist, Softlight, Padelm, and Brendan O'Connell. The tracks are courtesy of the artist or Track Club. Jacob Bain and Nice Cotto composed our theme song. You can find the artist at our website, dirtbagdiaries.com. This episode was produced by Marco Styler Gonzalez with additional audio production from Evan Phillips. Illustration by Walker Cahal. Becca Call is our executive producer. I'm Fitz Cahal, and you've been listening to the Dirtbag Diaries. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to And Then What, the segment where we break down the headlines and figure out what the hell's happened since then. Hey everyone, Fitz here. Thanks for sticking around for another edition of Then What. 4 years ago in our Endangered Spaces series, we covered the struggle to save Oak Flat, Arizona. An oasis in the deserts north of Phoenix, this landscape is sacred to the San Carlos Apache and a place where they continue to perform religious ceremonies. It's also beloved by climbers. It once hosted the world's largest climbing competition. The creek that runs through it makes it an ecologically rich landscape cherished for its biodiversity and birding. Mining has existed there for more than 100 years, but the plan by Resolution Copper, a foreign-owned company, was next level. Drill down and then under Oak Flat before detonating explosives that would turn the landscape into a 2-mile-wide crater. The battle over Oak Flat has stretched out for over a decade with changing administrations and legal fights. Now we find ourselves at a moment where we may soon know the fate of Oak Flat. Today, we are joined by Eric Murdoch, longtime climber and Deputy Director of Programs, Policy, and Government Affairs for the Access Fund. Eric, thanks for joining us today. The fight for Oak Flat, it's been going on for more than a decade now. Can you take us back to the beginning?
The beginning was really way back in the early 2000s when John McCain and Senator Flake started introducing bills in Congress. So we had a decade of bills where Congress had to consider whether to actually transfer this land. And no Congress for a decade would pass that bill. In other words, Republicans, Democrats decided that this was not a good idea. And this is a good example of how sort of our democratic process really works. It was not something that people wanted. So it was December of 2014 when McCain jammed it into the 2015 NDAA.
So just quickly to interrupt, the NDAA is the National Defense Authorization Act, which generally speaking gets passed every year, like as a bipartisan vote to fund the military. And so like, how did McCain get this wedged into this bill?
It was just sort of this deal between John McCain and Mitch McConnell, and they jammed this little provision in, and it said that the United States, upon completion of an environmental impact statement, would exchange this land with Resolution Copper, a foreign mining company. We were going to hand over Forest Service land, public land with incredible climbing, incredible ecosystems, and is really a sacred site where many ceremonies are done by the San Carlos Apache tribe. So it was a really unfortunate thing for a lot of stakeholders, and frankly, it was really unfortunate for the American public because it was a way to sort of get past democratic process the way it's supposed to work.
So the Access Fund has been part of the litigation to protect Oak Flat. Can you talk a bit about how you all got involved and why Oak Flat has been important to climbers?
Yeah, I think to the climbing community, the Phoenix Bouldering Contest was the largest bouldering contest in the world. And in the 1990s and even going into the 2000s, it was the place where if you were a professional climber, an aspiring climber, you wanted to be at this contest. But it also sort of was this incredible cultural moment for the climbing community. And I remember, camping out and everyone's sleeping out at Oak Flat together, and you wake up in the morning and they're just blasting the Star Spangled Banner by Jimi Hendrix just on, volume 11. And that's how this thing started. And then the San Carlos Apache would do some tribal ritual and get everyone pumped up. And between the Jimi Hendrix and the San Carlos Apache, it just had this incredible feel. And I think that, the Access Fund is really interested in protecting access for future generations, but we're also really interested in protecting America's climbing legacy. And Oak Flat is really important to America's climbing legacy.
Since then, there's been this long process. There's been lawsuits. Where are we at right now in terms of getting closer to a decision on Oak Flat?
So we're really lucky that the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee made sure to add that little nuance to the law that said, you got to do an environmental impact statement before the land exchange is fully executed, before the title is handed over to Resolution Copper, which of course is a mining company that has one of the major stakeholders is China. So since 2015, the Forest Service has been busy working on this environmental impact statement, and certain administrations like the past administration kind of did a little extra due diligence and asked the Bureau of Land Management to audit the EIS. And there's all these like gamesmanship going on. But the current administration, within a couple months of the beginning of this administration, they ordered the Forest Service to finalize the EIS. So that is the trigger for handing over the title. So in August, the day before it was supposed to be transferred, Access Fund and our other co-plaintiffs appealed the exchange, the transfer of the title, and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals agreed. they required an injunction to be applied to this issue. And now on January 7th, we're going to go into court. We're going to ask for the injunction to continue, to stop the transfer and to hear the case and to really consider what are the damages to the San Carlos Apache? What are the damages to the climate community? What are the damages to the environment? And we think that if the court hears the case and considers the facts, that they will agree with us and not agree with Resolution Copper that the EIS is sufficient. In other words, our case hinges on the fact that this EIS is a sham.
There has been a community that's come together to try to protect Oak Flat. And what does that coalition building look like?
There's another lawsuit with the Apache Stronghold, which is a nonprofit that sort of represents the tribe. Now, their case is based on religious freedom. This is a land that was taken from the San Carlos Apache when the San Carlos Apache were herded to an Indian reservation. This is their homeland, but it's Forest Service land now. So their case is based on religious freedom. Our case is an APA case, a case that's based on the bureaucratic process of the environmental impact statement. You didn't do this form properly. You got to do it again. The problems with the environmental impact statement are multifold. Doesn't truly address the water issues, it doesn't address the appraisal. How much is this worth? How much money is the American public really giving away? There's a handful of folks who are teaming up with Access Fund together to file this lawsuit. But when I think about this issue, how egregious it is to take this land and potentially destroy it and to do serious harm to the environment, to the climbing community, to the San Carlos Apache, that the stakeholder group, that the co-plaintiff group would be bigger, that we would have more people joining in and that the human-powered recreation community as well as the American public would really have much more of a problem with this. Remember, we're handing over billions, tens of billions of dollars of copper to another country. So that probably doesn't sit well with a lot of Americans.
So we're talking about copper mining here. I think it's important to realize that we're not talking about people with pickaxes in a mine shaft right now. Talk to me about what the mining project that's been proposed looks like.
I lived in Arizona, 60 miles away from Oak Flat throughout the early 90s, mid 90s, and I was studying geology, and I became an exploration geologist for over a decade. And that was a place where I climbed and explored a lot. And there was mining with pickaxes and all of that going on for 100 years in that location. And the San Carlos Apache were able to do their ceremonies, this really interesting coming of age ceremony for girls, and climbers were wandering around and exploring the landscape, and folks were going out and doing bird watching, and it's got incredible riparian areas. And there was a lot of mining in the zone. And it was sort of standard mining where people would dig mining shafts and adits, and people were pulling copper out of the ground for many, many years. And I remember when I was climbing there and there was all this new drilling going on. They were doing all of this testing to figure out if there was a larger copper deposit deeper. And what was found is that there was a giant copper deposit even deeper. And the mining technology sort of caught up with this deposit. In other words, we can now mine ore, copper ore. Ore is as you know, is an economic term, right? Is it worth it to pull the shit out of the ground and sell it on the market? So the mining technology caught up, and it became clear that you could mine this very deep copper deposit. But the proposed mining technique, and it's not the only way to get this copper out of the ground, is something called block cave mining. And it involves drilling and digging way down deep beneath the surface and creating what would eventually be a crater that would collapse into itself. And that crater could be as wide as 2 miles wide and 1 mile deep, and it would basically destroy the area. So it's not that there hasn't been mining for many, many years, and it's not that there haven't been many stakeholders that have been sort of sharing this piece of real estate in a way that has been pretty successful. It's that this new mining technique would destroy the entire landscape. On top of that, we would be handing off a Forest Service land to Resolution Copper, which is owned by BHP and Rio Tinto. And like I said, the major stakeholder is China.
with the case going before the Ninth Circuit, is this kind of the last chance?
It's a good question. I think we're going to win the lawsuit. So I think the courts are going to block this land exchange in the first place. But, if we lose the case, we can appeal. At the same time, there's the Apache Stronghold case, which, of course, the Supreme Court decided not to hear, although some of the justices said that they should hear it. There's also an interesting new bill that was just introduced by Representative Adelita Grijalva, Raul Grijalva's daughter. But Raul Grijalva was introducing the Save Oak Flat Act for a decade, and Representative Grijalva, Adelita Grijalva, just introduced a bill actually last week called Save Oak Flat from Foreign Mining. And so there's a legislative solution also. So this fight is not over.
I think one thing with the series we always try to do is we try to sort of give people ways that they can have an impact. What do we do right now? Because it does, I think sometimes it feels like we don't have a lot of, once it gets into the courts, like regular people don't have a lot of say in something like this.
Well, now that there's a bill in Congress, you can call up and write your representatives and tell them, look, there's this bill moving through, and I really want you to support this because I really think that this is a bad idea. If you're American, you can connect with this because you don't want to see the copper resources that we own just being sent off to a foreign company. And then, of course, just talking to your friends and your family and be like, did you know that we're doing this thing? And getting people fired up. And I think the third thing is go out there as climbers, and not everyone's into the sharp bouldering and the climbing on volcanic tuff, but go out there and climb and take pictures and share your story and tell people about how awesome this place is. And those are the sorts of things that we can do right now to sort of help share information and provide some perspective to what's going on with this issue.
Thanks, Eric, for joining us today, and thanks to the Access Fund for working on this issue. We put a link to the bill in the show notes, as well as info on how to reach out to your representatives. Thanks to Diaries Plus members. Your support makes this kind of reporting possible. Thank you.